Welcome to another episode from the Veterinary Research Channel. Today, we're diving into some fascinating research that explores the potential environmental links to a significant health concern in our canine companions, multicentric lymphoma. This type of cancer, which affects multiple lymph nodes, is unfortunately quite common in dogs. It's a disease that, in many ways, mirrors non-Hodgkin lymphoma in humans, sharing similarities in how it presents, its biological characteristics, and even the approaches used for treatment.
That's right, David. And just as with non-Hodgkin lymphoma in people, scientists have been investigating whether various environmental exposures might play a role in the development of multicentric lymphoma in dogs. We know that in humans, factors like exposure to radon and certain volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, have been implicated. Radon is a naturally occurring radioactive gas, and VOCs are chemicals that can be emitted from a variety of sources.
Exactly. Given these connections in human health, researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison set out to investigate whether similar environmental factors, specifically environmental radon and proximity to horizontal oil and gas drilling, commonly known as fracking, might be associated with multicentric lymphoma in dogs. Fracking is a particular interest because it's a known source of volatile organic compound pollution.
And it's not just VOCs. The fracking process and the associated storage of wastewater can potentially impact the environment in other ways too. Fracking can generate significant air pollution containing VOCs, as well as billions of gallons of contaminated wastewater. This wastewater is often stored in underground injection wells, which can sometimes be located far from the actual fracking sites. These operations involve chemicals, including benzene, xylene, and toluene, which are known to cause blood-related cancers in people. Furthermore, some studies have suggested that fracking well activity can even be linked to increased indoor radon levels in nearby homes.
The researchers hypothesized that multicentric lymphoma in pet dogs could be linked to these environmental chemical exposures, either from residential radon or from living close to fracking sites. To explore this, they conducted a study focusing on golden retrievers, a breed known to have a higher risk of developing this type of lymphoma.
Let's move on to what the researchers actually found in their study. They looked at a group of 52 golden retrievers that had developed multicentric lymphoma and compared them to 104 unaffected golden retrievers that were matched for age and sex. All these dogs were part of the Golden Retriever Lifetime Study, a large ongoing study that follows a large cohort of dogs over their lives. For each dog, the researchers determined their home addresses and categorized them based on Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, radon zones and average residential radon levels in their county. They also calculated the distance of each dog's home from active fracking wells and associated wastewater wells.
When they analyzed the county-level radon measurements, they found no significant differences between the dogs with multicentric lymphoma and the unaffected control group. They looked at both the average percentage of households in a county with elevated radon levels and whether the dogs lived in counties designated as high radon zones by the EPA. In both cases, the percentages were very similar between the two groups of dogs. Unfortunately, they didn't have access to radon measurements from the individual homes of the dogs in the study.
Turning to the fracking wells, the study revealed that there was no significant difference in how close dogs with multicentric lymphoma lived to active fracking wells compared to the dogs without the disease. They looked at the median distance and also the percentage of dogs in each group that lived within 20 kilometers of a fracking well, a distance within which groundwater chemical contamination has been previously reported. Again, the percentages were not significantly different. They also examined the density of fracking wells in the counties where the dogs lived and found no significant difference between the two groups.
Interestingly, when the researchers looked at the fracking wastewater wells, they found that dogs with multicentric lymphoma did live significantly closer to these wells overall, with a median distance of 123 kilometers compared to 206 kilometers for the unaffected dogs. However, it's important to note that when they looked at the percentage of dogs living in close proximity, specifically within 20 kilometers of a wastewater well, there was no statistically significant difference between the two groups. This analysis was limited to data from 22 states where information on wastewater wells was available.
Now, let's delve into the discussion of these findings. Multicentric lymphoma is indeed a common and often fatal cancer in dogs. Given its similarities to human non-Hodgkin lymphoma and the established links between human lymphoma and environmental factors like radon and VOCs, it was logical to investigate these potential connections in dogs. The study specifically aimed to see if there was an association with environmental radon or proximity to fracking operations a known source of VOCs.
The fact that the study found no difference in county-level radon exposure between the two groups of dogs is an important piece of information. While radon has been linked to leukemia in minors and potentially to non-Hodgkin lymphoma in children in some human studies, this study in golden retrievers did not find such an association at the county level. It's worth noting that a previous study in the United Kingdom also did not find a link between environmental radon and lymphoma in dogs when looking at postcode level data. However, the current study acknowledges a crucial limitation. They only had average county radon data and lacked measurements from individual households, where radon levels can vary considerably. Therefore, future research directly measuring radon levels in the homes of affected and unaffected dogs is definitely needed.
Regarding the fracking wells, the lack of a significant difference in proximity to active wells was another key finding. Some studies in children have suggested a link between living near oil and gas development, including fracking, and an increased risk of certain blood cancers. While this study found a slightly higher percentage of dogs with lymphoma living within 20 kilometers of a fracking well, this difference was not statistically significant, and the researchers suggest that a much larger study population might be needed to definitively rule out this association.
The finding that dogs with lymphoma lived significantly closer overall to fracking wastewater wells is interesting, but the researchers caution that this statistical difference might not be toxicologically meaningful. Even though the median distance was smaller for the lymphoma cases, it was still over 100 kilometers. Given that studies have detected groundwater chemicals up to 20 kilometers from fracking wells with safety issues, the large median distance to wastewater wells in this study suggests that this factor might not be a primary driver of lymphoma risk in these dogs. Importantly, there is no difference in the proportion of dogs living within that closer 20-kilometer range of wastewater wells.
Overall, the researchers conclude that their data do not provide strong epidemiological evidence for a direct link between fracking activity and lymphoma in dogs. However, they emphasize that future studies should focus on more direct measurements of chemical exposures. This could include measuring volatile organic compounds in indoor air and drinking water within individual households, as well as analyzing blood or urine samples from dogs to look for VOC metabolites. They also suggest exploring longitudinal monitoring of airborne VOC exposures, perhaps using silicone devices attached to dog collars.
The study had several strengths, including its well-matched case control design nested within the large golden retriever lifetime study, which helps to minimize bias. The use of a comprehensive database to identify fracking operations across the United States was also a significant advantage. However, the researchers also acknowledge some important limitations. The number of lymphoma cases was relatively small, and the study population likely represents dog owners who have the resources to seek veterinary care, potentially introducing a socioeconomic bias. Since fracking and wastewater wells tend to be located in lower-income areas, the study might have missed a portion of the at-risk dog population. Furthermore, the availability of wastewater well data was limited to only 22 states.
Another limitation was the reliance on county-level radon data, which came from voluntary testing often associated with real estate transactions, and may not accurately represent radon levels in all types of homes, such as apartments. The lack of individual home radon measurements is a key area for future investigation. Finally, the study did not explore potential differences in risk based on the specific subtype of lymphoma due to limitations in available data, which is another avenue for future research as more cases emerge from the golden retriever lifetime study.
In conclusion, while this study in golden retrievers did not find significant associations between broad environmental radon exposure or proximity to fracking wells and the development of multicentric lymphoma, it did observe a statistically closer distance to fracking wastewater wells for affected dogs, though the toxicological relevance of this finding at those distances is questionable. The lack of individual household radon data and the limitations in wastewater well data highlight the need for more focused research, particularly on direct measurements of volatile organic compounds in the home environment, to better understand potential environmental risk factors for lymphoma in dogs. Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Research Channel. A link for the referenced paper is in the video description. Remember to test your knowledge by answering the questions in the description, and as always, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.